you took over. What got you rolling there? And then also I wanted to ask you about the couple defensive stops you had there late. The all defensive teams came out. You didn't get a vote. I don't know if you're surprised by that.
I said next year.
So let's start with what got you rolling offensively in the fourth.
I just said to myself, we got to win this game. I got to be way better because 3 quarters I didn't play good. So I just came in the fourth, get to my spot, and lead the team to win.
The Dallas Mavericks steal game 1 on the road against the Timberwolves to take a 1-0 series lead in the Western Conference Finals, with Kyrie Irving leading the first half and Luka Dončić closing the show in the second half. This is Inside the Mavs. Welcome to Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura. I'm your host, Kevin Gray, Mavericks Pre and Post-Game host on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Appreciate you joining me here for this episode of Inside the Mavs. Make sure you download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And if you're watching this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on the video and subscribe to the channel as well. And you can follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. Let me know in the comments how you're feeling about the Dallas Mavericks after they get the 108-105 road win in Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals over the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Mavericks doing something they haven't done in the Jason Kidd era in the NBA playoffs, and that's win a Game 1. Of course, in the first couple of series so far in the playoffs, they lost Game 1 on the road to the Clippers, but of course won that series in 6 games. They lost Game 1 on the road to the Oklahoma City Thunder, won that series in 6 games, but they took advantage of a Timberwolves team coming off a grueling 7-game series after they dispatched of the reigning NBA champion Denver Nuggets, and it was the Mavericks led by Kyrie Irving's offensive aggressiveness in the first half, where he scored 24 of his 30 points in the first half to keep the Mavericks in it going into halftime. And then Luka Dončić closing the show, scoring 19 of his 33 points in the second half, including a huge monster fourth quarter where he had 15 points to be able to seal the deal. And Kyrie Irving finding PJ Washington for the go-ahead three-pointer with just under 2 minutes left in the game. And the Mavericks go into Minnesota and steal Game 1 and home court advantage against the Timberwolves, in setting up the Mavericks for what will be Game 2 on Friday night with a ton of momentum and the ability to play loose and free. It was because of their ability to aggressively get after the Minnesota Timberwolves. We had talked about what the Mavericks and what they needed to do in terms of some keys to victory in Game 1 against Minnesota. One of the things I didn't necessarily expect for them to do was to dominate in terms of their points of the paint. We knew coming into this series that the Timberwolves allowed the second fewest points in the paint during the regular season. The Mavericks scored 62 points in the paint against that front line of the Timberwolves. The Mavericks doing a great job, especially in the second half, defensively bottling up Anthony Edwards and the Minnesota Timberwolves shooters, which we'll get to and how they were able to play, especially in the first half. But what you saw from Dereck Lively II, he had a terrific game as well. When you look at his numbers, he was able to put together the 9 points, the 11 rebounds that he had a couple of block shots, was a plus 19, going 4-4 from the field. We mentioned the combined 63 points that Luka Dončić and Kyrie Irving had, and PJ Washington coming up huge again with corner threes in the fourth quarter. I mentioned the go-ahead one that he had with just under 2 minutes left, but a collective team effort where the Mavericks did 2 things I didn't necessarily expect them to do in Game 1: dominate the points in the paint, and they out-rebounded the Minnesota Timberwolves 48-40 And when you're closing out possessions with the 37 defensive rebounds that the Dallas Mavericks had, you're scoring 14 points off the turnovers that the Timberwolves had, as the Timberwolves turned the ball over in this game 10 times, the Mavericks taking advantage of those 10 turnovers with 14 points. And you're getting the aggressive Kyrie Irving that we saw in the first half. It is a recipe for success, and the way the Mavericks defended, especially in the second half. But we start in the first half where things got off to a little bit of a rocky start for the Mavericks. Both teams tied at 3.5 minutes into the first quarter, but the Timberwolves went on a 6-0 run to increase the lead to 12-6. That's because Jaden McDaniels was playing extremely well. He had a terrific first half with the 19 points that he did to lead the Minnesota Timberwolves, as he went 5 of 6 from downtown from the three-point line. And you felt like maybe that wasn't necessarily going to be sustainable for Minnesota, and eventually it wasn't in the second half. But the Timberwolves were able to close the final 2:24 of the first quarter on a 12-4 run. This was after the Mavericks had went on an 11-0 run themselves to take a 23-21 lead after they had gotten down by 9 after an Anthony Edwards three-pointer with just under 5 minutes left in that first quarter. And that was big for the Mavericks to get themselves back into that game where you felt like early on Minnesota, who felt like they could continue to build off the momentum that they had against the Denver Nuggets, the Mavericks were able to come back and be able to get themselves a quick lead. Kyrie Irving was the aggressor with 13 points for the Mavericks in that first quarter, and you saw the difference. We know how motivated Kyrie Irving was, and you'll hear from him throughout the course of the show as well about the motivation that he had after hearing Anthony Edwards say that he was going to take on the challenge and the matchup of Kyrie Irving. And I tweeted out at Kevin Gray Sports, I said, be careful what you wish for, young man. This Kyrie Irving has been there and done that as an NBA champion and has embarrassed some of the best players in this league as one of the best finishers that the history of the league has ever seen. In fact, here is Kyrie Irving talking about that post game and the mentality that he had, but also appreciating the fact that the young fella decided to call his shot. But Kyrie Irving saying he knows what it is, and Edwards now knows what it is as well. Take a listen.
We've talked about Ant as being one of those kids with no fear.
Yeah.
You know, he's on TNT after Game 7 talking about, I got Kyrie. Yeah. You know, what did you think of that matchup and kind of that game within the game?
Yeah, no, as a peer, man, I love that. I love it, man. It's nothing better. You know, when Ant was a little bit younger, I'm sure he was watching me, and you know, when he was in high school, I was watching him. So for me, it's more of those exciting matchups that I look forward to too. Right after the game, it was funny because he said it right then and there, and I think the whole world was looking like, okay, you know, yeah, you better know what you're talking about, Ant. You know, and I respect that, and that no fear mentality that he has is why I love him as a competitor and why I love him as a person. But when we're on that court, I know he's gonna give his all. I'm gonna give him my all, and at the end of the game, you know, it's all love, and we're in between those lines. He knows what it is, and I know what it is.
So Kyrie Irving appreciating the challenge of the young man and Anthony Edwards. He had 8 points in that first quarter, along with Jaden McDaniels, who had 9 as a Timberwolves shot nearly 55% from the field and 6 of 11 from downtown in that first quarter, as they were able to lead at the end of one, 33-27. But it was Kyrie Irving's aggressiveness, getting the layup in transition with the hoop and the harm on Naz Reid with 2:24 left in that first quarter to cap off what was that 11-0 run to get them back into it. But you give the credit to the Timberwolves for closing that final 2:24 on that 12-4 run to take that 6-point lead going into the second quarter. But in the second quarter, the Mavericks were able to keep themselves close. The Timberwolves had increased their lead to 41-32 after a Kyle Anderson floater, as he was able to get things going. He and Jaden McDaniels combined for 9 of the Timberwolves' first 10 points of that second quarter, as the Timberwolves were up 41-32 after that floater with 7.5 minutes left in the first half. But the Mavericks, again, responding with a 9-2 run themselves to pull within 2 at 43-41. That had broken a scoreless streak of nearly 4 minutes. In fact, Kyrie Irving was the one to get that bucket in transition to cut that Timberwolves lead to 7 at 41-34. Again, breaking a scoreless drought of nearly 4 minutes. And again, Kyrie Irving's aggressiveness, whether it was getting to the paint, being able to finish out in transition, being able to finish in the mid-range, his variety of shot making and the amount of free and open space that he didn't see in the series against the Oklahoma City Thunder. You could just feel that he was breathing a little bit of a sigh of relief with the amount of space that he was able to utilize to be able to get to his spots and really keep the Mavericks close in the first half, where they were down by 3 at the end of the first half at 62-59. But Luka Dončić, he was able to get on the left side on Anthony Edwards. He got to a bank shot with a nice hoop and harm to get the and one. He hit that free throw that cut the deficit to 41-37. And then Dončić throwing another beautiful go-ahead pass to Kyrie Irving for the layup in transition. Again, taking advantage of the opportunities that are there when you have a chance to be able to get some of those live ball turnovers against Minnesota. And that's exactly what the Mavericks were able to do. And then P.J. Washington getting a three-point play of his own, drawing the foul on Karl-Anthony Towns with the reverse layup and the and one. That came with a minute 15 left in the second quarter. That had it at 56-52. And then the amount of and ones that the Mavericks had in that second quarter, 3 big ones. We talked about the one that Dončić had on Anthony Edwards. We talked about the one that P.J. Washington had, drawing the foul on Karl-Anthony Towns. And then with less than a second left, which I thought was a huge momentum play in the first half, where the Mavericks were able to get themselves down to just 3, where they could have been down going into halftime by at least 6. Kyrie Irving, he got the hoop and the hard, drawing the foul on Jaden McDaniels with that and one bank shot. He hit the free throw to cut the lead to 3 with less than a second left going into halftime. And again, a big momentum play, part of what was a spectacular first half for Kyrie Irving. The Mavericks shot just 1 of 6 from downtown, though, in that second quarter, but 60% overall from the field. Jay McDaniels had 10, but Luka and Kyrie combining for 19 of the 32 points that the Mavericks had in that first half. But Kyrie Irving, setting the tone aggressively for the Mavericks offensively, was able to do the job to really keep them in it, because without the 24 points that Kyrie Irving scored in that first half, the Timberwolves could have ran away with this and hid early on in the first half, but Kyrie Irving was able to keep them in it with his ability to get to his spots, finish in transition, and lead and carry the Mavericks offensively in the first half to set up Luka Dončić going into the second half to be able to take the game over and really put his stamp on it, especially going into the fourth quarter. More on this as we get to the second half and how the Mavericks were able to be led by Kyrie Irving and Luka Dončić to take game 1 on the road against the Minnesota Timberwolves for a 1-0 series lead. But before we get there, let's hear from today's sponsor of our video and our podcast. Let's hear from Aura. Today's video is brought to you by Aura. Do a Google search on your name and email address to see how much information comes up about you. I was devastated by the amount of information that I could be seeing searching my name and profile, and I knew then I needed to be protected for not just myself, but also for my family. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work to protect me and my family so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to start your 2-week free trial. Please see the link in the description. Back here on Inside the Mavs. Thank you for hanging out with us through that spot, and thank you to today's sponsor of our video and our podcast in Aura, as the Mavericks get the 108-105 win on the road in Game 1 to take the first game of this best-of-7 series and steal home court advantage against the Minnesota Timberwolves, as they get huge performances from Luka Dončić and Kyrie Irving, combining for 63 points in the win. And one of the things that the Mavericks did extremely well on the defensive end is that they were able to defend the paint against the big front line of the Minnesota Timberwolves. In fact, only allowing 38 points in the paint for the Timberwolves. And you give credit to guys like Daniel Gafford and also Dereck Lively II. When you look at what they were able to do, especially in the first half, Dereck Lively having really good defense with a couple of blocks on Karl Anthony Towns, and then was rewarded with a dunk on the other end. Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington contesting, finding ways to contest contest Karl Anthony Towns jumpers. Gafford had a good block on Rudy Gobert as well. You saw that the Mavericks were aggressively trying to protect the paint with their front court, with obviously Dereck Lively II and obviously with Daniel Gafford as well. And they did a good job of defending the paint throughout the course of this game, only allowing 38 points to the Minnesota Timberwolves. And as the game went on, and I know Jaden McDaniels had a big first half, Kyle Anderson was able to make his imprint on this game a little bit as well, and you would feel their presence as well as Anthony Edwards as we got into the second half. But the Mavericks, I thought, did a great job of keeping themselves close to be able to give themselves a chance going into the second half. And that's where we go starting in that third quarter. We just mentioned Daniel Gafford and some of the defense that he was able to play, especially in the first half. He got off to a good start in that third quarter, scoring the first 6 points of the period for the Mavericks as they briefly took a 67-66 lead with just over 8 minutes left in the period. You fast forward 3 minutes, the Timberwolves back out in front by 4 at 77-73 after a Rudy Gobert dunk with 5.5 minutes left in the period. And the Mavericks would be able to go on a quick 4-0 run with 4:45 left in the period to tie the game at 77. You think about Daniel Gafford had a nice one-hand punch off the rim, working off the pick and roll, and you started to see some of that be able to start to get working for the Mavericks, be able to work pick and roll, be able to finish at the rim where the Mavericks love to get into the vertical game. You saw that happen with Kyrie Irving and Daniel Gafford working that. Then Derrick Jones Jr. getting the dunk at the rim off Dereck Lively's assist in transition that had the Mavericks up 67-66. And then I mentioned that quick 4-0 burst that the Mavericks went on when they were down by 4, 77-73. Who was able to tie it? Kyrie Irving with that gorgeous lefty bank shot over Rudy Gobert. That came with 4:45 left in the third. Both teams didn't shoot the ball great in that third quarter. In fact, they combined for just 11 points, did the two teams, in the final 4 minutes and 45 seconds of that third quarter, as the Timberwolves maintain a 1-point lead at 83-82 at the end of 3. Josh Green drilled a three-pointer off of a Jaden Hardy assist that eventually got the Mavericks back up by 1 at 80-79. When you look at what they were able to do there, it was important for them to be able to get that shot because Green had a chance to get the Mavericks back up by 3 with a dunk that he missed that would have made it 82-79 off of a gorgeous Luka Dončić bounce pass. But then that led to the missed dunk by Green, and then Naz Reid hit a 3 on the other end that made it 82-80 Minnesota with 1:23 left in that third quarter. So a big momentum swing there, but at the same time, Luka Dončić was able to get his 7th assist of the game by getting it to Daniel Gafford on the wraparound for the dunk to tie the game at 82. Eventually, the Timberwolves were able to take a 1-point lead going into that third period, which set up a dramatic fourth quarter, especially for the Mavericks, particularly for Luka Dončić. Luka Dončić and Kyrie Irving throughout the course of the year, you've seen Luka Dončić be able to establish himself, especially in the first half, particularly in the first quarters, with dominant first quarters, and then Kyrie Irving closing the show. You had the reverse in game 1 against the Timberwolves, where Luka Dončić saw Kyrie Irving set the table and the tone offensively for the Mavericks in the first half with his 24 points that he had. But then, of course, Luka Dončić being able to close things in the second half, particularly in the fourth quarter, where he had 15 of his 19 points of the second half in that fourth quarter, where the Mavericks absolutely needed him. And you start in that fourth quarter where they were down by 1 to begin the final frame. They eventually got down 5 at 89-84 with 10:22 left in the fourth. When Dončić would then rip off 7 straight points for the Mavericks to give them what was a 91-89 lead, forcing a Timberwolves timeout with just over 9 minutes left in the fourth. Overall, that turned into what would be a 13-0 run for the Mavericks to have them up by 8 at 97 to 89 with 7.5 minutes left in the game, and you felt like the Mavericks had taken control of the game. Luka Dončić getting an elbow jumper, getting to his spots as he continued to talk about, and you heard him at the beginning of the show, getting and feeling like he needed to win this game for Dallas. He hit that jumper that made it 89 to 88. Then he drilled a step back three-pointer on the very next possession on the left wing to have them up 91 to 89 at 9:07 left in the fourth quarter. And again, you're feeling like the Mavericks are taking control of this game, getting to their spots, running their offense, and Luka Dončić taking over as far as the game is concerned. And then Dereck Lively, he would get a stuff at the rim off of another Luka Dončić, what would be a miss at this point to increase their lead to 6 at 95 to 89. That came with 8:43 left in the fourth. So look, even when the Mavericks saw Luka Dončić miss a shot, a second chance bucket and opportunity, Dereck Lively was able to put it in. And again, where would the Mavericks be without Dereck Lively II and what he has brought to this team throughout the course of the season, whether it's his hustle and his ability to block shots and deter things on the defensive end, but also on the offensive end, getting second chance opportunities, getting rebounds, and being able to close out possessions on the defensive end, but also be able to help out with some dirty buckets in terms of being able to put it in on the offensive rebound. So at that point, the Mavericks eventually find themselves up by 8, 97 to 89. But you give the Minnesota Timberwolves credit. They would not go away quietly in this game. In fact, they will respond with a 10-1 run themselves over the next 3 minutes to take a 99-98 lead after Karl Anthony Towns hit a three-pointer, forcing a Mavericks timeout with just over 4.5 minutes left in the game, as the Mavericks at one point went 7 straight possessions without a basket, and you saw them go cold and not be able to hang on to that lead after they had done all that work to regain the momentum to be able to take what was an 8-point lead. Eventually, it turned to be a 13-1 run for the Minnesota Timberwolves as they led 102-98 with 3:37 left in the game after an Anthony Edwards three-pointer. I'd mentioned just a few moments ago that you would feel Anthony Edwards' presence in the game, and he made himself feel that in the fourth quarter, giving the Timberwolves what would be a 4-point lead with just over 3.5 minutes left in the game. But again, what the Mavericks have done all season long, they responded with resiliency, and they were able to pick themselves up once again and respond. And they would be able to do so closing the final 3 minutes and 37 seconds on a 10-3 run that got started with a 6-0 run over the next minute and a half after the Timberwolves had gotten that 13-1 run to take that 4-point lead. They were able to take a lead at 104-102. Again, thanks to the timely three-point shooting that the Mavericks had. Look, they didn't shoot the ball great from three in game number one. In fact, going just 6 of 25 from downtown for 24% in game one from distance. But Luka Dončić draining a three-pointer at the top of the key to cut the Timberwolves lead to 1 at 102-101 with 3:14 left. And then Luka Doncic's defense in the fourth quarter, while yes, we will talk about the scoring and the timely buckets that he had, it was his defense in the fourth quarter that was key. 2 huge plays that he had. Number one, he gets the steal on one end, leading to transition, finding Kyrie Irving, who would then eventually find P.J. Washington in the left corner to hit a three that had the Mavericks up 104-102 with a minute 56 left in the game. For me, the play of the game, P.J. Washington hitting that go-ahead three, making enough threes. While, yes, they only made 6, we talk about timely shot making for the Mavericks, and they made enough when they needed to down the stretch to be able to get themselves this win. And we knew that points may be hard to come by in terms of scoring that in the paint. They were able to dispel that throughout the course of game one, but they hit enough shots from distance to be able to give themselves an opportunity to win this game. And P.J. Washington coming up big for the Mavericks as he was able to do in game one. And then, of course, Luka Dončić with a terrific defensive play on Rudy Gobert with that tip pass and steal on the attempted pass by Conley to Gobert. That came with just a little over a minute left. Then the Mavericks were up 104-102 at that point. It was Luka Doncic's timely defense and the winning plays and mentality that he had down the stretch to be able to help the Mavericks be able to get this win. And what was a huge moment in this game as well, there was a basket interference call that was upheld after Karl-Anthony Towns had a putback dunk that would have tied the game at 104 with just under 2 minutes left in the game. It was ruled basket interference. It stayed that way, and the Mavericks were able to remain up at that point, and their defense was able to take over down the stretch. And then Luka Dončić putting the dagger in the Timberwolves for game one with his step-back jump shot on the right elbow to give them a 4-point lead with 49 seconds left. Josh Green tried to make it interesting when he fouled Mike Conley on the three-point attempt, but Conley missed 2 out of the 3 free throws as the Mavericks were able to hang on for the 108-105 win. But it was Doncic's winning plays and his winning mentality down the stretch that helped the Mavericks be able to get this done and be able to steal the momentum. Because, look, the Timberwolves were content to play that drop coverage to allow the Mavericks to be able to get to certain spots in the lane and in the paint, and the Mavericks were able to make them pay with a series of floaters, whether it was Kyrie Irving, whether it was Luka Dončić getting to his spots, and the number of and-one opportunities that the Mavericks took advantage of. They did a great job of finishing plays as far as knocking it down at the free throw line, where the Mavericks went 16 of 17 for 94% at the free throw line in game one. And then you look at the defense that they played, especially in the second half, when you look at what the Minnesota Timberwolves did from some of their big-time scorers. Karl-Anthony Towns, just 3 of 11 from the field in the second half for 9 points. Anthony Edwards, just 2 of 9 from the field in the second half with 6 points. Jaden McDaniels, after he had the 19 points in the first half, just 2 of 6 from the field in the second half with 5 points, and he was a -6. The Mavericks did the job in clamping down on their defense and being able to corral what was Anthony Edwards, Karl-Anthony Towns, and Jaden McDaniels, who had a big first half, to really be able to stop them from scoring. You look at what the numbers eventually were in the second half. The Mavericks held the Minnesota Timberwolves to 7 of 24 from 3, 29%, and 36% overall from the field. And you look at what they were able to do from a scoring standpoint, only allowing 43 points in that second half after, of course, what you saw them do in the first half, scoring the 62 that they did. So the Mavericks not only were able to get clutch baskets from their guys in the fourth quarter, particularly Luka Dončić and PJ Washington with the go-ahead 3, but their defense stepped up, and you give it to the credit of Luka Dončić, obviously Dereck Lively the second as well, and others who really ensured that the other guys from Minnesota were not going to be able to put their imprint on the game. And that's a collective defensive effort, whether it's PJ Washington, Derrick Jones Jr., everyone made sure that the defense in the second half is exactly where it needed to be. And you out-rebounded Minnesota in this game by 8, 48-40, which is huge against this massive front line of the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I expect him to obviously come back with a little bit more energy in game 2. But what you now set yourself up for, if you're the Mavericks, is an opportunity now to play loose, to play confident, because you've done your job already. You've earned the split in game 1 by getting the win. You steal home court advantage, and you put the pressure on Minnesota to have to win at home. The old adage, of course, in the NBA playoffs is a series doesn't start until a road team wins. Well, the series has started because the Mavericks were able to be the aggressors on the offensive end with Kyrie Irving in the first half, and then Luka Dončić closing the show in the second half, and Kyrie Irving taking on the challenge of wanting to put his imprint on this game and utilizing the array of offensive skills that he had, and he was able to do so in a huge way for this Mavericks team. So a terrific win where they get their 5th win on the road this postseason, tie for the most in the NBA playoffs right now. They get their first win in a game 1 under Jason Kidd, and they continue to put pressure on their opponent, and this time from the outset of the series with a game 1 win. And this is a huge, huge way to start off this series, knowing how talented Minnesota is and the confidence that they had coming off of beating the reigning NBA champion Denver Nuggets. You put all that to bed by being able to get a road win in the first game. And now going into game 2, they'll practice on Thursday, get back on the floor, clean up the things that they saw in game 1. But when you look at what they did overall, the Mavericks protected the basketball, only 13 turnovers in the game. They were able to convert off of the Minnesota Timberwolves turnovers with 14 points. But most importantly, they dominated in the paint, and they were able to win the rebounding battle, and their stars played like stars. Kyrie Irving, Luka Dončić combining for the 63 points. The supporting cast with other guys in double figures like P.J. Washington, who was a plus 12 in the game. Dereck Lively doing the job with a couple of block shots that he had, being a perfect 4-4 from the field, the double-digit rebounding. He continues to play well beyond his rookie year, and now the Mavericks are in a terrific position after game 1, getting a 108-105 win, and I thought just a complete and total team effort for this team. Cleaning it up and winning at the free throw line. While they didn't knock down a bunch of threes, they made timely ones when they needed to. You dominated in the paint. You won the rebounding battle, and your stars showed up in the biggest moments of these games. Kyrie Irving keeping them in it in the first half. Luka Dončić taking over in the second half, getting enough help from your supporting cast, and you were better than the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, can they continue to build on that momentum going forward into game 2? But for now, the Mavericks take game 1, 108-105 on the road over the Minnesota Timberwolves to take a 1-0 series lead in the Western Conference Finals. Of course, the winner moving on to the NBA Finals. That'll do it for this episode of Inside the Mavs. We'll continue to have daily podcasts when it comes to this series as well. Grant Abscess will be back with me on the next episode of Inside the Mavs. Make sure you download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast for free. Give it a 5-star rating. Write a review for it while you're there. And if you're watching this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on the video as well. And you can follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. Again, the Mavericks take game 1 to take a 1-0 series lead over the Minnesota Timberwolves. This has been Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura.